But it helped me understand that, okay, how can I look at her past and understand what she went through, and how can I actually look at it from a different perspective? And when I actually did that, when I actually looked at her past and I saw where she came from, how her dad treated her, how her first ex-boyfriend treated her, how her looks and society's expectations of her treated her, all these mitigating factors that came into play.
Mm-hmm.
And in her past, I've realized many things. I realized, well, one thing, I'm not even in that past. I have
Mm.
nothing to do with it. Two, there's no influence that I had over that past. Three, it's all these like complex situations that came together that she's not even aware of. And I've just realized, I'm like, okay, so then why am I taking this personally as to it determining my self worth? And I just had no answer. I'm like, well, there's absolutely no reason. Just because she did this, it still doesn't mean anything, right? And I realized, I'm like, well, that's on me now. That's on me. It's just how I feel. And
Mm-hmm.
when I began to take accountability for how I feel, it's just like, okay, well, you know, take accountability for it and surrender to it, but realize that you got to let it go, and don't let it dictate how you look at relationships and love and women. And I haven't. I don't generalize about women saying they're all cheaters, they're all this, which is what a common theme is, especially
Mm-hmm.
nowadays, all over the internet and certain types of toxic content out there,
Yeah.
and it's about how a woman should be in their eyes, right? That kind of content.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, well, that's when you look at it, it's just like all that is coming from pain because these women didn't match up to their standards. And so that's why it's just like they paint these pictures of how women are supposed to be, and just negating the fact that everyone has their own unique individual experience in life, and you can't dictate and you can't generalize and you can't say how a group of people are or an entire gender is or how they're supposed to be because you had a few exes hurt you in the past.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that's something as I get older, I understand more is everyone has a unique experience on Earth, right? And
Mhm.
in my experience doesn't negate yours. It's not better than yours or worse than yours. It's just my experience. And because of that, you're different people, right? Like me
Mhm.
and you are different beings, and
Exactly.
that's okay. And we can learn a lot from each other. Like, yeah.
Exactly, right? And it's when you look at it, it's technically a logical fallacy when people generalize about an entire gender, right?
Mm,
Because then
mm-hmm.
you're just like, oh, they're all like this. It's just like, have you met all 4 billion women to say that they're all like this? How do you know? You don't know.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
to negate, to generalize about them as to paint them to a one-dimensional belief or a linear belief about them, that is a logical fallacy because then it takes away from the actual logical fact that everyone is experiencing this world in their own unique way,
For sure.
right?
Or even with like one person, right?
Mm-hmm.
One experience you had with them, right? That's just one experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
It they're complex people themselves, right? And so they might be different with somebody else, right? Or
Yeah.
in a different situation the next day, right? Like
Oh yeah.
that's something to realize as well.
Well, yeah. When you take, for instance, like when you go to when you go to like a concert or like a like a rave or a music festival, right? Even though we're all listening to the same song, every single person, even in your group, just say that you all like the same type of music, all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, everyone's going to experience it differently.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever noticed that? Or even when you go see a movie with a group of people, everyone's going to experience it differently because
Sure.
they're going to be picking up on things that you didn't pick up. You're going to
Yes.
notice things that they didn't pick up, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be somebody who be like, I don't really like it that much, and another person's going to be like, oh, like he was great in this, and
Yeah, for
blah blah
sure.
blah. So that's our own unique experiences and how we are interpreting what we just saw,
Mm-hmm.
right? Despite that they're playing the same music and the movie is the same story, the actors, nothing changes as to, the movie that we're watching, how we are all experiencing it and watching it is going to be through our own filters,
Sure.
through our own interpretation.
Yeah, one thing it happened to me when I was quite young, like I'd say like 23, 24,
Mm.
is it was strange that my first experience realizing this was actually at my job.
Okay.
And we had this big group meeting with there was speakers and like hundreds of people there, and I walked away with maybe a negative opinion or something like this. And before I shared my opinion, I asked some people like, what did they think of it, right? And then they gave their opinions, and then I thought about their opinions, and then it altered my own, right?
Mm.
And so that's one thing that I've like learned is like before I react or I decide this is how I feel about something, talk to other people because it will change your perspective, or you can learn, or you'll influence them, or they'll influence you, right? Don't be so stuck in your ideas.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't be stuck in your perception of reality, right? Because
Yeah.
that's when you look at it from, and that's one thing too. Yeah. I mean, that I've learned too, especially I didn't learn it as early as you, so
Yeah.
hands off to you. This
No.
took me
Well,
about 34, 33, 34 years to learn this.
well, like
But
for me, it was one small thing I recognized,
yeah,
and then I'm trying to expand that to other areas of life, right? But that was the first time.
that was the
But
first time,
it
right?
was the first time. But
Yeah.
I'm definitely not perfect in that regard. Like, I'm still being more open minded. It's something I'm continually to work on.
That's good. And that's the whole point, right? Just
Yeah.
understanding that my perception of reality is mine, sure,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a fraction of reality, right? But
Yeah.
then we have, many of us, it's hard for us to understand that outside of just, our perception of reality, just a little speck, right? There's a reality that exists outside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to what I was saying earlier, right? If we're emotional, if we're looking at the world through that spectrum of anger, not looking at the reality that exists outside of it, we're negating all these other mitigating and aggregating factors that exist. And that's why when sometimes, well, almost all the time, if we react in anger,
Mm-hmm.
we almost always regret it because it's
Yes.
just like, oh, like why did I do that? Because then
Mm-hmm.
another piece of information comes into play, or you start hearing about what another person experienced in that situation, or you negated another aspect to that situation. You're like, ah, fuck, I shouldn't have done that.
Sure. Like I know, like
Yeah.
one thing for me, it's how much my perspective changes just on one night of rest. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't matter like if I was angry or if I was happy or if I was sad or whatever the emotion was, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fear, anxiety, whatever. And then the next morning happens and I'm in a different state, and then I'll look just like 12 hours before, and
Mm-hmm.
I have a different state when I wake up,
Yeah,
different perspective.
because you sit with it, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting
Yes.
with it. You're not letting it dictate anything outside of that situation because you just sit with it. You're like, okay, this is how I'm feeling. Let me just sit with it. Don't react to the situation. Just let it sit for a bit. Let it calm down,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because in the heat of things, like we're all human, we're gonna feel emotions,
Yes.
and then we're gonna filter it through whatever mental filters that we may have about the world, which then in turn transposes into how we feel.
Mm.
Because emotions are like still it's just the raw data
Mm-hmm.
of a situation, right? Excuse me.
You're fine.
It's the raw data, and the feelings are what it's a dilution of those raw data, and then we start making our stories up or beliefs and all these things, and that's how we feel. And so that's where things get lost in translation, especially because if we react to that, well, that's where feelings get hurt. That's where other people get hurt, and that's where we regret,
Mm.
make choices that we wish we didn't make.
Yeah.
So,
That's one thing that I struggle with. Like, you were talking earlier, like how when you think of someone else, like you'll be angry at them or why they do this. But like for me, one thing I struggle with is like reflecting negatively on your past things that you've done.
mhm.
Right, like I'm not proud of everything I've done in my life, and sometimes I get fixated. Like, why did I do this one thing? And I'll focus on this one
Mm,
thing, or feel really bad about that one thing for a really long time.
mm,
And learning to just accept that, and that okay, I did one thing bad, but it doesn't make you as a we all do things bad, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Well, would you find that do you find any kind of practice has helped significantly when it comes to accepting those
Yeah.
situations?
So it's something I still work on. I still struggle with, to be honest. But I'm try to have a much more positive outlook on just life in general. So like, just be more positive about things. That does a lot. Also, realizing that in the past, my self confidence or my self worth or my was low, right? And improving that,
That's
right?
good.
Like so, I used to like me as a person. I used to feel like I was a loser. Like literally, I felt that way. You know, for probably most of my life. You know, I felt that way for a long time. And so correcting that mentality, right? Like no, you're not, or like
Yeah.
you did this one thing wrong. That's okay. Do the like or even focused on setting goals or like making small improvements on yourself. And then now that I do that, I can look back on where I was before. I'm like, oh, like I'm this new person than I was even a year ago. Like I reflect like the mental state I was a year ago.
Yeah.
And being able to see that, then you can focus on like, okay, like it just takes work. It just takes me putting in the time, whatever the goal is, right? Whether it's doing the cold plunging, right? Or yoga or your job or whatever your goal is, or emotional, right? That's a big one. Like
Yeah.
just saying it takes effort, consistent effort,
Yeah.
and then you can see the improvements.
Oh, 100%.